Welcome back to class. I'm Chef Sunshine here with Heart.org, and today we're going to be talking about heart healthy eating when you also have hypertension and or diabetes. So in our previous classes, we have addressed Choose My Plate and talked us through that, which is essentially the DASH diet, which stands for Dietary Approaches to Stopping Hypertension. We've talked about shopping for and stocking your pantry with low sodium and no sodium items so that you're not building sodium bombs for yourself, and that you can maybe use a little salt at the end. We've talked about flavoring your food with other things than salt, which would be herbs and spices and citrus, and just building a lot of flavor so that you don't need to depend on sodium. Today we're going to be making dessert. Yeah, that's right, talking about diabetes and dessert in the same class because we deserve it. So we're going to make this delicious heart healthy dessert that will also be great for a diet where you might have hypertension and have to watch your sodium and increase your potassium and magnesium. Apples are the base of this dessert, and apples are very high in a polyphenol that has been proven to keep your blood sugar at a healthy level. So apples are great for diabetics. And like I said in other classes, if you feel deprived and you feel you're not enjoying your food, it's going to be really hard to stick to a healthy diet. So we're going to make it even more enjoyable today, and we're going to dial in all the details of why this is good for you if you have hypertension or diabetes. So I'm going to walk through our ingredients first, and we're starting with apples. It's a classic fall baked apple dessert. It's going to make your house smell amazing. It's great for breakfast. You're going to love it. We have flax meal. I just buy a container and keep it in my freezer and put a few scoops in with different ingredients. It really can be mixed into most things, especially baking. We have nuts here, and today I've chosen pumpkin seeds and almonds, and they are both very high in magnesium and potassium. And it doesn't have to be overwhelming. You don't have to buy a huge bag of really expensive nuts. You can just buy the little $2 small bag in the baking aisle of, say, the slivered almonds, and have them in your pantry to just sprinkle into things. For our dried fruit, I have chosen golden raisins. I love golden raisins, but the biggest reason I've chosen them is because raisins, for the most part, it's very easy to find raisins that are not sweetened, that don't have extra sugar added to them. And a lot of dried fruit, especially cranberries, it's really hard to find unsugared or unsweetened dried fruit, which is crazy because dried fruit is already sweet. Plus, it's a really great price point. Raisins are one of the least expensive dried fruits, and they're sort of familiar to everybody. And this will not be a surprise to you if you've been in other classes, but we have a little lemon. And we have a pumpkin pie spice mix. Super popular this time of year. Most people think it's delicious. I'm a big fan. You can also replace this amount with cinnamon if that's what you have or if that's what you prefer. And last but not least, we have a little bit of honey. We're going to need that to mix our filling together and keep it nice and gooey. So this recipe calls for 4 apples, and it can be any kind of apple. I have these little tiny Fuji apples, but you could use green apples or delicious, really anything that's your favorite. You could do this with pears as well, but with the pears you'll probably want to bake it a little less because they get softer more quickly. So we're going to start with getting the top off of this. And as I said, apples have so much great nutrition in them, tons of fiber along with everything else, and high in polyphenols that specifically help even out your blood sugar. So that's a nice surprise. We can have something sweet and satisfying. We can bake things and enjoy it and not feel deprived. So what I'm doing, so if you have an apple core, you're 5 steps ahead of the game. I do not use apple cores. I don't have gadget specific things. I always just use my knife for things. But I just cut most of the way down in here. You don't want to cut all the way through because you don't want all the filling to come out when it's baking in the oven. And then I'm going in and just loosening that core with my little spoon. And I'll probably have to go, oh, it escaped. So I got some of it out. I'm going to finish just going around and getting it out. The reason I'm only going to demo one is because you don't want to sit here all night while I core apples. So we're going to fill this with some really tasty treats. Okay, so we have a nice little pocket there for all of our yummy filling. And we're going to keep this top of the apple because when we bake it, we're going to put it on top. The presentation is super nice. And why waste that top of an apple? So we're going to put this on the side. Now we're going to start with our nuts. So nuts in general, but especially almonds, walnuts, peanuts, and pumpkin seeds are high in magnesium and potassium. Those are both great for heart health and hypertension. Magnesium helps the heart muscle relax a little bit. It also blocks too much calcium going into the heart through the bloodstream, which is a good thing. And potassium, as far as hypertension goes, actually helps mitigate the absorption of sodium in your bloodstream. So those are both great. And there's potassium and magnesium in so many things. Let's talk about dark leafy greens again, which we talked about on Choose My Plate. You should always have a handful of some kind of dark leafy green, whether it be collard greens, bok choy, spinach, kale, just throw it in whatever you're making and you're going to be way ahead of the game. Plus, part of Eat the Rainbow, your food will be beautiful. That's another reason I chose 2 kinds of nuts tonight, just to make it even prettier. So I put them in my little bowl, and then next I'm going to put raisins. Raisins also have a good deal of potassium in them. Dried fruit in general again, but raisins are specifically good for getting more potassium. And as we all know, potassium from bananas, lots of fruit have potassium and magnesium. Then we're going to mix our pumpkin spice in. So we put in 1/4 cup of nuts. We put in 2 tablespoons of raisins. We're putting in 1/2 teaspoon of the pumpkin spice mix or cinnamon if you choose. And then we're going to put 2 tablespoons of this flax meal. Now flax, again, high in fiber, so when you're eating anything sweet, it helps slow it down. The protein in the nuts, the healthy fats in the nuts, the omega-3 fatty acids, and the fiber in both the apple and in this flax meal help metabolize the sugar from the honey and the apple at a much slower rate. So the glycemic index on this dessert is actually quite low. So we're going to want to mix that around and make sure it's fairly evenly mixed. And then we're going to put in 2 teaspoons, just enough to stick it together, of this honey. And just think like it's going to be delicious and inform the flavor and make it sticky and gooey, but at the same time, it's splitting 2 teaspoons of honey between 4 desserts. So you're really not getting too much. And here's a trick. When you're measuring something sticky like honey, just dip your spoon in a little bit of water and then pour your honey in, and it'll help get that honey off of the spoon so you're not struggling with it. So 2 teaspoons of this honey. And then we're just going to mix it together. So you want your oven to be on 400 because we're going to bake it at 400. And we're just going to Oh man, down. My little almond sliver escaped. We're gonna mix this together. So I don't know if there's anything nutritionally exciting about honey, but the reason that we're using it instead of sugar, because it's basically the same sugar content, is that it's giving it a little bit of moisture. And actually, yeah, it's getting nice and sticky, but some of this flax meal is trying to stay dry. So what we're gonna do is put another teaspoon of water right in here to help it come together. And that should be good. It probably doesn't help that I'm using the smallest bowl in the world and the smallest spoon in the world to mix it. Okay, beautiful. So I wouldn't blame you if you just ate a teaspoon of it while you were making it. We certainly have enough. Oh my gosh, it's going all over from my tiny bowl. Okay, so really what you want to do is just fill it. Oh my gosh, I forgot the lemon. That's okay. So as we've said in classes in the past, lemon is a great replacement for your taste buds when it comes to salt. So we're gonna put half a teaspoon of lemon juice in this. Plus, it's also a really great additive when you're when you're making dessert, apples, anything. Lemon juice is great for that. Anyone who's ever made an apple pie knows you want to put a little bit of lemon in there for balanced flavor. And we certainly have enough sweetness in here with the apples, the honey, and the raisins. Okay, beautiful. So now we're going to stuff this guy. And you can be really generous with it. I put it all the way down into the center that we carved out. And then I'm going to mound it and just put it around here too. We want this to be really luscious. We want this to be really satisfying. Another thing you can do that has magnesium and potassium in it, and also calcium, is to serve this once it comes out of the oven with a little bit of Greek yogurt. Super delicious. Yogurt and nuts and honey and raisins go really well together. So that's it. We've got this guy stuffed. We've got this healthy dessert that helps us care for our bodies and reduce our hypertension, even at our blood sugar when we have diabetes, or even just to look out for our health so that we don't go in that direction. All the heart healthy goodness in here, the fiber, the omega-3 fatty acids, the protein. And the next step you would make, you would carve out the rest of them, fill them, and then take a pan. You can use a baking pan. I almost always just use a cast iron, as we've said in other classes. I line mine with foil because we're going to want to cover it. So you would fill the pan with the 4 apples and then just fold this over. And you can add a little bit of water, so you would add like 2 or 3 tablespoons, just enough to barely cover the bottom. It's going to help cook those apples and make them nice and soft. Also, if you're not an apple skin person, you could certainly peel the top half of it, but you want to keep the bottom half with the skin on because it's going to hold it together. Otherwise, you'll just have applesauce or an apple brown Betty, I guess. So we would put this in the oven for 30 minutes at 400. Then take it out, remove the foil from the top, let it open up, and cook it for another 10 minutes. If you have large apples, you probably want to do 30 minutes and 20 minutes, but my little apples would be perfect for 30 minutes and 10 minutes. And then when they are done cooking, number 1, your house will smell amazing and so fall-like. And number 2, you will have these delicious little stuffed guys with this gooey center, crunch and goo and apples and roasty and cinnamon. Really nice. And as I said, you could certainly put a little bit of Greek yogurt over it for another texture and flavor, just a little brightness. You could eat these for breakfast, or you could even slice them up and put them in some oatmeal would be incredible. I definitely invite you to try this. I hope you love it, and I hope you find it as satisfying as I do. Thank you so much for joining us in this class, and I'll talk to you next time.